Hey friend, in this video, I'm going to show you my go-to EQ moves for a worship snare drum. We're going to go over the snare top, the snare bottom, and even a snare triggered sample, and how I blend them all together and use EQ on each one. And then at the end, I'm going to show you a very quick way to do this. If you're strapped for time, and if you're like me who has to mix some songs the day of, and you need to cut a couple of corners but still get it to sound great, I'm going to show you that at the end. So I'm doing this whole series on my go-to EQs, and if you guys haven't seen them yet, I've done kick and toms already. Overheads are coming up next, and I'm just going to keep going after that, bass, guitars, and everything. So make sure you subscribe to stay up to date with those. Okay, let's dive in. So let me give you guys the lay of the land here. I'm just going to solo the entire drum kit here so you guys can hear it. Cool. So just so you guys are aware, the drums have processing, the toms have processing, snare has no processing. The only thing that's on the snares right now is the gate and the trigger. And so let's go and just solo the snares here. So that's all three snares together, top, bottom, and trigger. And let's just solo the snare bottom here. Okay, and then show you the snare top. And just because I want to show you guys this, because this is my favorite gate plugin, I'm going to bypass the gate and listen to, like, the cymbals are just gone. And then I put it back in. What? It's wild. It's wild. This is my favorite gate plugin. Link down below if you guys want to pick up this gate plugin. It is so good. And then here's the snare trigger sample. I'm using a David Whitworth sample from the Welcome to Sundays API kit. All right, and there's no processing on that. So cool. Okay. So what I would normally do if I had a lot of time to mix is I would actually just solo the snare top and bottom first. And you guys can see I've already flipped the phase on the snare bottom because whenever I didn't have this phase flipped, I lost all the low end on the snare. And if you're like me and you're not a vegetarian, you like a beefy snare. So you got to flip that phase if you're not getting that low end of the snare. So then I will just listen to these and I will kind of manipulate the level on how I like, them together. So pull this down a little bit. So I think I'm going to stick with that for now. I used to not like snare bottom mics at all, but I have really grown to love them. And there's something about the splashiness, like the snap that comes from the bottom snare mic is just so nice. So don't neglect that because it's a gem. It's a gem. So we're going to start with the snare top, and I am going to mix these two snares together, listening to them at the same time, because I'm thinking of it or listening to it and thinking about it. My mindset is like, this is one instrument to me. And so first things first, I'm just going to pull up a high pass filter and just take out any unnecessary low end that I don't really need in this snare, right? So let's just do that real quick. A little bit. And so you can see if you're using an EQ that has like an RTA, you can see where that fundamental is sitting, and that really helps you just get an understanding of like, maybe I don't want to kill the fundamental of the snare at all. So we're gonna come up about to that point until it tails off, and you probably won't hear much of a difference, but it's just gonna take out that low end, and just create a little bit of room for the kick and snare and the toms and anything else that sits in that very low frequency range. Next cut that you guys probably are going to see coming is the like 400 to 700 range. It just makes the snare sound, it's like a box, right? Like a piece of cardboard. So we're going to pull some of that out. Yeah, so like right at like 530 or something right there. So let's pull some of that out. And then I'm going to come up to about 700 and maybe pull a little bit more out. All right, so let's just give it a bypass, see what we've done so far. And then on. Yeah, it's already tightening up, already getting rid of some of those frequencies. You could even go even way more hardcore than what I'm doing here. Just use your ears, use your judgment, depends on the type of snare sound that you want. Next thing I will do is I will find that fundamental of the snare drum that I'm mixing, and I'm going to give that a little bit of a boost, and maybe a lot of a boost. It just depends on the snare drum you're going for. If you're going for like a Bethel type snare, you're probably going to want a lot more low end in your snare than if you more like an upper room or elevation type snare where they're not as beefy. So let's just give this a listen and give it a boost. So I think we're gonna chill there for a second and let's bypass it. Already sounding great. And so since we're using a killer gate plugin and silencer, and if you guys haven't picked that up, it's so good. They're not even like I have an affiliate link for it, but they're not paying me any extra to say that. It is literally just that good of a plugin. We can boost the top end, so if you don't have a good gate or if the gate's not closing correctly, you cannot boost that top end. And so that's what I love, like a 7 to 8K boost on the snare, just to give it that crack, to get it to push out in the mix. So let's give this a listen and boost that. All right, now it's bypass. Already sounding so much better. And what's funny is we haven't even touched the snare bottom yet. So this is wild. So we're actually going to do something similar to the snare bottom, but with the snare bottom, you can get like a different type of crackly top end, and even some of that fundamental that you can't get with the snare top. So let's just give this a listen, and I'm just going to dive in here and kind of do what we did before. So this frequency is a little bit lower that we don't want here. Try here. Yeah, we don't want that. I don't like that either. So let's go find this fundamental and give it a boost. Oh yeah, getting some power in there now. And let's see what we can do here. You see how when I boost this high end, it doesn't get like harsh on the snare bottom mic. It just sounds a little bit more natural. So it's just crazy how these like EQ points that it's just the same every time it just immediately gets better. So now let's bypass these. That's our snare before both EQs. And now on. All right, and we haven't even introduced the trigger yet, but let's just give our drums a listen. So they're just a little loud. And obviously, we still need to put some compression on them. Maybe add like a smack attack or something on there. But just EQ wise, they are an absolute game changer. Let me do a bypass with with all of the drums, and then we'll put it back in. And it does have my reverb on here, so sorry about that, guys. I know that that's a little deceiving a little bit, but just the EQ change, man, it makes that snare so much more present. So now what I would do is I would then bring the trigger in, because I already know I'm going to use a trigger. I know that that it needs a trigger just to get that standard big worship sound, because most of the random recordings that I either get sent is it wasn't recorded super well, or they just didn't have a great snare drum. I literally think this was like a 5 by like 13-inch snare. It was tiny, and I just didn't know what to do in this situation. So I wasn't there for this recording. I don't think so. So now let's blend in this trigger as we go. So what I'm going to do is solo the snares again, and then we're going to pull in this trigger. Yes. Okay, cool. And so I am actually going to solo the trigger by itself. And what I'm going to do is find any overtones that I don't like in this sample, because some samples just have some weird overtones, and I can't always hear them whenever I have all the drums going or all like with the snare mics. So I like to solo and just get those taken out. So like right there, that little overtone there, like, yeah, we don't want that. So we're gonna pull this down and maybe probably make the Q really tight. I mean, you guys hear that EQ move that just tightened it up. Yeah, so much better. Okay, so let's take some of this low end out, and then we're going to give that fundamental a boost. Pull this down more. And then what I find, this is a little trick that I don't know what it is about most snare samples, but there's always some sort of like 4K area that I don't like about them. So we'll pull some of that out. Add some of this. That's a little bit too much. There we go. Okay, so now let's put it in with the other snares. See how it sounds? Okay, and let's bypass all EQs and then put them back in just to see what we've done. Oh my god, it sounds like a piece of cardboard. In. The only thing I would probably change is I would probably bring down the snare top now that I have this snare the snare trigger in, because the snare trigger just sounds so much better. So I kind of want that to be the prominent on these bigger hits here. And so this was at like 2.2, 2.3, and so let's bring this down a little bit and just get it redialed in for that entire sound that we want. There we go. Okay, I like that a lot more personally, but again, it's all about your preference. Like, do you want more of that low end? Do you want more of that top end? You get more of that, that smack and that low end from the snare top normally. So it just, man, it's very subjective. And so you guys should play around with those areas of the EQ. If you guys want, you guys want more of that fundamental boost, the fundamental if it's still very, cardboardy and muddy here, pull more of this out. Pull some 4K out if it's getting in the way of the vocals, or if there's just a high end on it that you don't like. That's always a go-to spot for me. So now let's listen to them. So I think there's a weird resonance coming from the sample. Could be wrong. Yeah, I feel like maybe we're doing too much here. Oh, sorry about that. No, it's the sample. Maybe the sample's not working. There we go. Okay, so now let's see what that sounds like in the mix. We may have to turn it down. It's probably a little loud. All right, guys, sorry about that. My computer crashed. I guess I've been running OBS and Studio One. My computer ended up crashing. That sucks. But anyways, here is the snare. So what I ended up doing is I ended up pulling the snare top and the bottom down even more. It's just not the best snare recording ever. But the EQ ideal still is there for sure. So I just want to give you guys a listen of the mix. So if it was like a more of a Bethel type of mix, you would probably want more low end out of the snare and not as much top end. And so you'd pull this down a little bit and then, go from there. All right. So last but not least, the quick trick is if you guys bust all of the snares together and then literally do something similar. So you guys can see what I did here. The only funny thing that I'm doing differently is I'm really pushing this like 1K here. Or what is it? 1400. And that's just like, it's really giving it some girth in the mix. So, I'm just going to bypass it here in the mix. So that's with no EQ. So I turned off all the individual EQs. And then that's with the EQ on the bus here. And then in the drum mix, boom, and then in the full mix, so you basically just take those EQ points and put it in a bus and just make sure that your snare trigger, your snare top, and your snare bottom are all mixed well together. And then you just EQ on that bus. And if you need to do something even crazier, like I tend to like throw in like an API EQ or an SSL EQ that has just some different flavor to it, just to add to that that sound that you're looking for. And so, but really this was just to show you guys like my general starting EQ points, like where to cut, where to boost, where to at least like look, to where to you need to cultivate, to sculpt the sound that you want, for your snare. And let me tell you, worship snares are the hardest thing to get right. And like there would be a lot more work for me to do on this to get it like finished. But I just wanted to show you guys like the idea of it, because a lot of times you just don't even know where to start. Or if you get into it and you're like, man, like nothing's working, is like you can kind of come back to this base point, start, pulling some of that mid-range out, adding in some of the top and the bottom, but then pulling it back to, dialing it in to see how much you actually need for the mix and what the song actually needs. So thank you guys for watching. Overheads will be next. So please subscribe and check that out. I love you guys. And if you guys want starting EQ points for your entire mix, I have a mixing cheat sheet down below, absolutely free. Pick that up and I'll see you in the next video.